What if I told you that the most effective way to stretch may actually be to not feel the stretch at all? That's what I'm going to tell you in this video. This way that we've been working with our clients that we found to be incredibly effective and how you can incorporate it at home. So if you're new to the channel, hi, my name is Catherine. I'm the founder and principal therapist of LSM Clinic, a sport and remedial therapy clinic in East London, and the creator of Creighton Structural Massage. In this channel, I share information about how the body works and tips that you can use so hopefully you can be pain-free or as close to it as possible. So in this video, we're going to go into a little bit of background about how I developed this technique. So if you're like me, I always like to know when somebody's like, this is what's most effective, or this is what's best, or this is what we do. I always want to know, why do you think that? What is it based on? What's the evidence for it, right? And evidence can come in a lot of different forms, but I really like to understand like the process behind getting to the statement of saying like, this is the most effective way to do it. So the first part of the video, I'm going to be breaking that down, right? I'm going to talk about what we observed in our clients, why I started doing this, and my theory based on my understanding of the muscles and what I've observed in clinic as far as why that's true. However, if you are not the kind of person who likes to have all of that detail to understand the like mechanics or the theoretical mechanics, I'll put a time link, like a timestamp in the description below, so you can just jump to the part that talks about how you can use it in your day-to-day life. If you're like, I don't really need to know why you think this works, I just want to know how to do it. So you can check out the description for that. So if you have been around for a while, you may be familiar with the stretching series that I did a few years ago. Basically, it was a 3-part series, and one of the main things that I was talking about is that your stretch shouldn't be really intense. It shouldn't be a really strong stretch. You want to max out at like 3 or 4 out of 10. And I explained in that video about stretch reflex, which I'm going to touch on here today again. When I started playing around with it, both in my own self-care and with clients, I started to notice that actually even more gentle stretching seemed to be effective. So as an example, one of the first ways that I saw it is that I was working with clients who had like knee pain and tight quads. And if I had them face down on the table so that we could stretch their quad, I would go through the range of movement, bring their heel up towards their hip. They would notice how stretchy it felt. I would notice how far it went. And then I'd take them back down, and then I would just lift it up like 1 or 2 inches. Like I would just feel a little bit of a change in the resistance under my hand. And then I would hold it there and have them breathe into it. And that would be consistently better than if I had taken their like up to 90 degrees and tried to stretch it, let alone pushing it further, right? And then I would retest after I'd done that first one, and they would get anywhere from 30 to 70% improvement from just those 3 breaths releasing that tissue. And when I started to notice that, I started to do it with a lot more things. And I noticed that consistently, if we don't go for the stretch feeling at all, we go for where we feel the muscle pull or that little bit of resistance, the effect that we would get from that time we put in stretching was way more. Like you'd get way more flexibility. There'd be more space in the joint. It was much more effective. And so I tried to figure out why. Now, it's hard to know exactly because there's limited studies on stretching and so many things, with the muscles that we don't totally understand. But this is my working theory for why it works. So we know that the muscles are made up of muscle fibers that are bundled into sections called fascicles, and then those are kind of bundled to create the muscle, and they've got all those layers of fascia. Now, a single muscle fiber is made up of a bunch of different sarcomeres, which are little sections of contractile tissue. So I've got a picture here so you can kind of see the drawing of it. But basically, so in a muscle fiber, you'll have these sections of sarcomeres, and the sarcomere is what contracts or doesn't, right? Now, one of the things that I have noticed with clients is that sections of muscle will be tighter than other sections. I believe that's we will use different sections of the muscle depending on like what position the joint is in when we're doing an activity. And from what I've seen, like that seems to be true in various kind of tests that I've done in the clinic. So if a section of muscle is tighter and we're going for a stretch feeling, we may actually be bypassing the tightest section of the muscle. The other thing that I think plays into this is something called the stretch reflex, which I believe I mentioned in the stretching series, but I'll also link it below if you want more information. And there's a link below about sarcomeres if you want to learn a little bit more about that. But basically, when a muscle is stretched, immediately the muscle contracts to kind of, we think, protect itself. The muscle contracts and then it will release as the stretch is held. And what I'd noticed in the really deep stretches that my clients were doing, when I first started, is that actually their muscles would get tighter when they were in the deeper stretch. So my theory is that when we take a muscle through to like a 3 or 4 out of 10 stretch, we're not overstretching the whole muscle, but maybe what's happening is those most tight sections of the muscle are kind of contracting against that a little bit. And then it's like the medium tight section of the muscle that's releasing. And obviously it would make sense that if you want to get the most benefit, you'd want to release the tightest section of muscle, right? So that's my theory, is that this very, very gentle approach to stretching is effective because we're catching the tightest section of muscle, right? So now that I've told you your theory and how it's come about in clinic, I'm going to talk to you about how you can incorporate this at home. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to come up with a different way to measure whether or not your stretching is effective, because you're not going to feel a stretch when you do this if you do this correctly. So you need to test before and after. And I have a very short little video about this as well. So you may have seen it before, or you may will be seeing it. But basically you want to test the range of movement of the muscle that is next to the joint of the muscle that you're stretching. So if you're going to do any muscles that are cross over the shoulder, you can do arm out to the side and over the head. You can do arm forward and over the head. In some cases you can do rotation, but that's kind of specific for rotator cuff. So you have this is how I feel before. If you are going to stretch your quad, you would bend your knee, right? You could lift your heel up towards your hip, the back of your hip, your butt, and then bring it back down. If you want to stretch your calf, you could point and flex your feet. Basically, you want to, whatever muscle the joint is whatever joint the muscle is crossing, that's the one you want to test, right? You can feel, does it feel clunky? Does it feel easy? Is there any pain? Stop when you feel a pain feeling. Then you take the two ends of the muscle, the points where they attach, and put them in a position that is slightly away from each other. And because that's basically what you're doing when you stretch, right? So when you stretch your quad, when you are bending your knee and holding onto your ankle, that is taking the ends of the quad, which is like the upper part of the thigh and across the hip and the knee, and you're bringing those apart, right? Because you're making that distance longer. When you do a chest stretch, you're taking the section from the front of the arm and the chest, and you're bringing them apart, right? If you do a neck stretch, the neck kind of like the scalenes attach here into the ribs. So when you do that, you're bringing those 2 points apart. So whatever muscle you're trying to stretch, you bring those 2 points apart. If you're not sure what kind of stretch that would be, you can ask a question in the comment, or you can just Google a picture of the muscle that you're trying to stretch. But the key is you intellectually will know that you're pulling these 2 sections apart, but you're not looking for that stretch feeling. If you get good at this, if you practice, you will start to notice the first point where the muscle kind of pushes back, where it becomes harder to go through. But that takes quite a lot of like focus on the muscle. And we can definitely show you this in clinic. So if you are one of our clients or you're based around London, East London, and you want to come in, we can go through how to do this with the muscles that you're working on 100%. And so then you want to hold it. I mean, the great thing about this is you can do it for like 2 or 3 minutes. You can do it while you're watching TV or reading in bed, or just like, if you have kids and they're playing, you can just, lay down and, stretch your quad or do a chest stretch. And because it's so gentle, you're not going to get that achy or inflamed feeling that you can often get with a longer stretch if it's more intense. Once you've done it for anywhere from like a minute to 2 or 3 minutes, you can then retest that movement and the movement should feel different, right? It might feel like there's more space in the joint. It might feel like it's easier to go through. It might feel smoother. You might notice like in the arm, it might feel lighter, or your lower leg might feel lighter. And then that's how you know that you have had an effect, right? And you can notice how long does that looseness in your joint feel like it lasts, or how long does your arm feel less heavy, or, you know, some of these things you will notice changes in your body. Like, for example, if you're stretching your hip flexor, you should notice that your lower back feels better, right? So you can notice those things. And, you know, part of that is connecting to the body, which can be tricky if you're in the habit of ignoring it. It's just a skill. So the more you practice, the better you get at it. So I would love to know, are you going to try this gentle stretching? Which muscles are you going to do? And let me know how it goes. If you have any questions about the pre and post testing so that you know that you're making a difference, or what stretch for what muscle, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And hopefully this will lead to a lot of people having a lot more release in their muscles and feeling a lot better after stretching. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you would like it, if you could share it with someone who might be interested in stretching differently or a new way to stretch, and subscribe if you'd like to see these videos as I release more. All right, thanks so much for watching. Bye.